All right. Hello, everyone. How are you? Hope everyone is doing well. Want to do a quick introduction of myself. I am Kevin Hunter, the Senior Talent Acquisition Manager and Strategy for Stanford Health Care. I have been here for about a little bit over 2.5 years. Um, we have a person we're going to talk to that I highly respect and has a phenomenal background in the military as well as a civilian. We'll talk about his journey, his experience. I have a number of questions I'm going to ask him as well. One of the things I want you to all to kind of just, if you have any conversations or questions, feel free to put that into the chat. I will do my best to kind of monitor the chat and answer those questions. But before we get going, I want to say thank you all for participating in our conversation. So I'm going to do a quick introduction, Shareef, and then we'll start from there. So, ladies and gentlemen, it is with great pride that I introduce a remarkable leader and tireless advocate for employee relations, Shareef Valentine, the Director of Employee Relations at Stanford Health Care. Shareef's journey is nothing short of inspirational, having dedicated 20 years to the Department of Defense, serving both as a soldier and a civilian. His focus on healthcare systems has not only shaped his career, but has also transformed the lives of countless individuals. Throughout his tenure, he has worn many hats, serving as an instructor and program manager across various initiatives, embodying the spirit of service that resonates deeply with our mission here at Stanford Healthcare. Shareef also is not just a leader; he is a certified change practitioner equipped with a master's degree. You changed my year. Master's degree in negotiation, conflict resolution, and peace building from California State University. Currently, he is furthering his knowledge and impact through a doctoral program in leadership and innovation at the University of Pacific. His unwavering commitment to growth and development serves as a beacon of hope and inspiration to us all. Today, um, as we come together to engage in a meaningful discussion focused on honoring our veterans, I must take a moment to acknowledge the immense sacrifice and steadfast service of the millions who have proudly worn the military uniform. These courageous individuals have faced unimaginable risks and challenges, standing tall as guardians of our freedom and protecting our nation. So, in observance of our Veterans Day, I just want to I want us to look at Shareef's steadfast passion for nurturing a culture grounded in respect and appreciation within our organization, his dedication to advocating for the valiant men and women who have served not only inspires us to honor their legacy, but also compels us to embrace our collective responsibility to uplift their voices. Together, as we recognize and celebrate their sacrifices, we also strengthen our community and enrich our nation's very foundation. Well, having said that, I want to introduce you to Shareef Valentine, the Director of Employee Relations at Stanford Healthcare. All
Kevin,
right.
thank you. I am absolutely humbled by that introduction. I don't think I've ever gotten an introduction like that before. I
Absolutely.
definitely appreciate it. So a little bit about me. So I went in the United States Army in 1999. I might be aging myself a little bit. And I spent about 22 years with the Department of Defense as a soldier and as a civilian. I was a 91 Papa, which is a radiology technologist. I actually went in the Army because I didn't want to go to college, and then they sent me to 2 years of college to be an X-ray tech. But it was, it was definitely, all fun. And got out of the military. Worked as an Army civilian. Actually was the executive vice president of the union on Fort Hood for about 4 or 5 years before transitioning to a national regional role at the union, then moved on from there to UC Davis Health as the director of labor relations. And then, that brought me here to Stanford Health Care as the director of employee labor relations.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you for that. So let's kind of get into the conversation. So one of the things that I wanted to just talk to you about is like, what were the kind of the biggest challenges you faced when transitioning from the military to civilian life? What are the things that really were a hurdle?
Yeah. Good. It's a very good question. I think for me, and obviously I can't speak for every veteran, but I know a lot of young folks went in the military straight out of high school. And so from kind of the time you get out of high school, you're maybe 18 or 19 years old, the military really does everything for you. Right. It takes care of your health care, takes care of your benefits.
Right.
When you do mob and demob, like when it's ready time for you to deploy, they make sure all of your things are good to go. You have your vaccinations, your dental work done, all of that stuff. Um, and then when you get out, it's kind of like this anxiety that now you have to do these things for yourself, and they may or
Right.
may not have been fully explained to you. And really depending on when you get out, right? Like, so, if you get out, you do your 3 years or do your 2 years or what have you, and then you get out, you're still very young, right?
Right.
And maybe if you've done 20 years, you've dealt with TRICARE for your family, for your spouses, or what have you. You may have a better understanding of how health insurance works. You may have a better understanding of financial literacy and things like that. But in most cases, it's kind of like now you have to deal with all these things for yourself.
Right.
And that's a little bit difficult because I think, almost everybody is kind of on that edge. Am I going to re-enlist or am I going to get out almost until the day that they get out? People are trying to get you to re-enlist. And so, you try to prepare as best as you can. And I think for some folks, because you get to that point where it's time to go and that anxiety of not understanding what's on the other side, sometimes we
Right.
re-enlist, right?
Right.
Rather than deal with all of the things that may be out there.
Right.
And I think the other thing that is difficult is for some folks. For me, it was a little less difficult because I had a medical job, and
Right.
a lot of the medical jobs translate one for one. But there's a lot of jobs in the military that don't necessarily translate to exactly to work in the civilian world, and it sometimes is very difficult for you to really advertise
Right.
your skill set in that
Right.
way that companies are looking for.
Right.
And I think that confidence in being in the
Yeah.
workforce and competing, in the workforce coming from your uniform.
I find that to be always conversations that I have with people in the military. That has been really a hiccup. How does that translate from military to civilian life, which we talked about beforehand, that there's a lot of transferable skills. So let me kind of go into my next question. So how did your military experience prepare you for your civilian work?
Yeah, I mean, and so again, I was lucky and if not blessed, because I went from active duty soldier to a Department of Army civilian, and so one day I was a soldier, the next day I was a civilian, and I still got to work with some of the people that I was in the military with. And so kind of, staying in that kind of military environment because it's a military town. I was at Fort Hood, now Fort Cavazos. And kind of still being in a military town, it was a little bit easier, right?
Right.
But if I have to point at any one thing, I had the opportunity to be a leader since I was 19 years old,
Mm,
right? And so I have 20 plus odd years of leadership experience in a way that I don't think anywhere else but the
right.
military can give, right? And
Right.
even sometimes I think back, like being a 19, 20-year-old soldier in the Army, there's three of us, in a department on a weekend running a radiology department. You have two
Right.
19-year-olds and a 20-year-old, right?
Right. Right.
Like, where else
Right.
can that
Right.
happen? I mean, what could
It's
go
true.
wrong? But where else do you get those opportunities and that leadership skill set from such a young age? And I think that the other thing that is just immeasurable is the natural fluidity of
Right.
teamwork in the military, right? Like
Right.
it's not a question. It's in your nature. It's in your DNA to
Right.
work as a team. And the thing about the military is, it's not just a job. You live
Right.
there, right? Like you're always you're a soldier, you're a sailor, you're an airman, you're a marine.
Right.
Coast Guard or what have you, you're that 24/7 at all times. You're never not in that status. And so you operate in that way, and your team is your team 24/7 a day. And I don't think there's any other experience that really can prepare you to work as a team kind of in that way. Because it doesn't matter if I like you, don't like you, if we get along, we don't get along, you beat me in spades or what have you.
Right.
When we get downrange, I'm relying on you to keep me alive and get me back home to my family, as are you for me.
Right. So those are one of the values there. Are there any other skills and values from the military, background that that's been most useful to you in your current role?
Yeah, I mean, process improvement, and just kind of thinking outside the box and being creative and using people for their strengths and determining, how to, because it's a volunteer army. You don't get to always pick your team. So you have to be able to work with the people that you're given to lead. And I remember I had an old first sergeant of mine that said, if you ever want to find the easiest way to do something, give it to the laziest private in the army. Right?
I don't think I've ever heard of that one, but okay.
And basically what they mean by that is, one, everybody has value, right? And sometimes you have to think outside of the box. And I think, one of the other skill sets is really, honestly, the ability to operate under pressure.
Right.
And, one of the things that a lot of people don't realize is that, obviously, the military is not always at war or in a war zone, but almost every job in the military has a combat version of that job, or a way to do that job kind of in combat. And so as a serviceman member, male or female, you have that in the back of your mind the entire time you're working, right? Anything that happens, global news or anything that happens, you're always thinking, is this going to trigger me to have to go, right? Am I going to have to protect my family, protect my country? This is the thing we signed up for. But being able to operate under that enormous amount of pressure almost your entire career, not just when things are due, I think it prepares you in a way that I just think other experiences just can't.
Right. You know what? When you think about that, I mean, the way you laid that out, I think about it. I'm like, that's intense. I mean, and you think about it, if in a 19-year-old, if you got to really think through that, that you're could possibly going into war, or you're going to be at another location. Correct. Life changes. So you have to be innovative, I think, to really go into another country. And we say that if you have a family, you have to be innovative. And so I tend to really look keenly at veterans, because 9 times out of 10, they're very innovative. They're very resourceful, and they can think through problems because they're very solution-oriented individuals. So I appreciate you kind of laying that out there.
Yeah. And I mean, to that point, anybody who's my age, and I think by the year that I went into the military at 18, I told on myself, remembers exactly where they were when 9/11 hit. Right.
Oh, and
many of us were under 21. And so that level of anxiety that we endured in figuring out what was happening, what our place is in what's happening, what's going to happen next, and that burden, like that weight that we signed up for, but it is a very heavy weight for a group of people who are, quite frankly, the faithful few. There's not a lot of people in the military, contrary to what people think. And the weight of that weighs down on us that are protecting, the nation. And so being able to continuously operate with that level of pressure, I think is substantial.
Absolutely. Thanks for laying that out. We're going to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about kind of like the systems that helped you during your transition. What resources or support systems were helpful during your transition to civilian life?
So, I mean, for me, I found a lot of the kind of service groups like the VFW and veterans of foreign wars and things like that. There's a lot of groups that are helping veterans that don't get a lot of airtime. And I think depending on what era of veteran you are, depends on what group works best for you, right? I think the VA is helpful, but what's more helpful than the VA, honestly, and I'm a little bit biased because I represented VA employees for almost 10 years, but it's the people that work at the VA. the veterans that work at the VA,
Right.
the ones that
Right.
check you in and say to you, hey, if you need a little bit of help on this thing, you should go talk to this person or that person, or call this number or what have you, because
Right.
they've been where you are, right? They know that look
Right.
that you just got here, you just got out of the military, you really don't know what's going on. I
Right.
remember that look, that was me. Let me help you out. And I think those are extraordinarily helpful resources. I think the other resource is, again, other veterans.
Right.
Is really being able to reach out to veterans that are already doing it, right? I think any veteran that has been out in the civilian world for some time understands how this feels. You have guys that get out, or gals that get out later after you got out, or are just now getting out, and they'll reach out and they'll call you and say, hey, I'm about to get out, what should I do? Who should I talk to? Is there anything that I can, anybody that that can help me get a job, or different things like that. I'm in HR, so I get that a lot. But that part doesn't really change, right? You get out of the military, and folks that were in the military, folks that are currently in the military, veterans, they're still your family. And so we're still a community that really relies on each other, in that way. And I think, companies that have like veteran support groups, right? Like if you don't know a lot about that company, you'll go to that company's website, you'll look to see if they have a veteran support group, and you'll reach out to that veteran support group before you reach out to the company itself, because you want to get a better idea of how that company represents themselves. Is it good for veterans over there? Et cetera.
Right. Very good point. Very good point. So I'm curious, how did you choose a career in healthcare after military service? Tell me about that journey.
Yeah. So I was already in healthcare when I went into the military.
Okay.
And my mother's a nurse, my grandmother was a teacher. And so I'm going to be honest, like I didn't have any kind of like special mission to be in healthcare. They showed me a video and they said, if you pick this job, you'll get to work in a hospital, you'll get to wear scrubs, it's going to be relaxing. If you pick this job, you're going to be out in the field, out in the woods, and stuff's going to be blowing up around you. So I said, well, I'm going to pick this job because that's the pick for me. And it opened a world up to me that I really don't think I could have experienced at that age or that point in my life in any other way. There is almost no way to be an X-ray tech at 18 years old and actually do the things that I was doing from 18 to 20, other than in the military. And then I got out of the military. I no longer do direct patient care. I have severe PTSD from my time in the service. And so I had to transition careers. So I went to school to get a bachelor's degree in healthcare administration. And then I spent some time kind of as a disability counselor. We call them PEBLOs, Physical Evaluation Board Liaison Officers. What we would do is we would kind of go in and we would help the soldiers medically retire. So if you had a soldier that could no longer physically do their job, we would help transition them into the civilian world, but we would transition them through the VA, get them their benefits, get their family their benefits, all of those things. So when they got out, they didn't have to go to the VA and apply for all of those things, their retirement, all those things were already taken care of. And so that kind of allowed me to give back in a way that was, very different than any other job, because these were soldiers that had been where I just came from. So being able to help them transition into civilian life, even in a way that I didn't necessarily have, was enormously fulfilling for me.
Right. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And so in that same vein, what advice would you give to other veterans considering a career in healthcare?
Yeah.
What would you recommend that they do?
Well, the first thing I would say is, the water's warm, hop in. Right? I mean, if
that's true.
If anybody is asking or cares to know, healthcare is the place to be.
Yep.
And so, it is, if you're interested in innovation, if you're interested in, I hate to be cliche, saving the world, this is what we do every day, whether it's in research, whether it's in the day-to-day preventive care, whether it's in outreach, whether it's in health equity. We are saving lives, and that is what healthcare, is, and we're saving lives as a community. Regardless of where you work in healthcare, we're all trying to get to the same place. and there's so many opportunities and so much space to grow in
Right.
healthcare. I think there's just so much that's happening in healthcare that everybody can find
Right.
a corner to be in and call their own. And I mean, we're living in a time where there's so much education around healthcare. There's so many healthcare programs.
Right.
Whereas, when I was coming into healthcare, there weren't as many kind of specific programs for specific. It was a lot of on the job training.
Right.
And so, if folks are thinking about healthcare, again, the water's warm. Hop on in.
I like that. I like that. And I highly recommend that for anyone that's interested. Healthcare is a phenomenal industry. I've worked in a number of industries: aerospace, automotive, manufacturing. Healthcare is probably one of the industries where every day is different.
Yeah.
Every day is different. You are really doing some things that you're not working in a silo. No matter how big the company is, you are really doing a lot of things and have your hands in a lot of things and being able to make some influence. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So having said that, why'd you choose Stanford Health Care, and how has the organization supported you as a veteran?
Yeah, I mean, it's Stanford, right?
That's
I mean,
true.
it is definitely an elite organization, and it's an organization that encourages and appreciates creative thought, and growth, right? And I think it's reflected in our work in the community. It's reflected in our partnerships. It's reflected, in our goals, right? I'm always excited about organizations that push their
Right.
people to grow,
Right.
and do important and unique things. And so that definitely was enticing for me.
Right.
So it was kind of a little bit of a no-brainer. And I've been thoroughly supported by not only my team but by my leadership, and even just honestly having the opportunity to speak to these issues.
Right.
It's definitely when I got the call to sit in and have this conversation. Not only was I humbled, but I also reflected on I've been in a lot of organizations, some even connected to the military, that have never asked any of these questions.
Right.
And so this is part and parcel of that point and that support that we're talking about. I'm having this conversation today. I also have members of my team that have spent time in the military, that have spent time in multiple eras: Vietnam, Gulf War, Iraqi freedom. And it is a very encouraging feeling. There's other members of leadership, throughout the organization that are, former Marines, former Air Force, former Army. And I'll be honest, that I was not expecting that, but it is a very warm and comforting feeling that there are other people that have walked similar paths as me.
Absolutely. So my last question: what lessons from your transition could help healthcare organizations better support veterans going through the transition?
Yeah. I think, being able to have an understanding of how military work maps to civilian work is helpful, because there's a lot of talent that's out there that doesn't know you're looking for them, and you may not know that you're looking for them either, right? And so if we're looking at specific skill sets, then that doesn't really change. The title, the name, how it's done may be different, but the skill is the same.
Right.
I also think the other thing that's important to remember is, if you've done 20 years in the military, you have a lot of benefits that you're getting out with. That an organization, your benefits package may be great, but it's not necessarily what they're looking for, because you may already have all of those things, right? And so, being able to speak to what those issues are, what it is that veterans are actually, looking for. I think the other thing is, having kind of that onboarding experience for people that are really fresh out of the military, right? Because and just kind of, framing what the difference is between a civilian or private sector organization and a military organization, because sometimes that transition can be a little bit rough, because you're coming from a very structured, uniform organization, especially if you've been in for an extended period of time. You're most likely in a leadership position. Being a leader in the military is a lot different than being a leader in the private sector or in a civilian space, right? And understanding what that looks like, but also just remembering when you don't have a choice in who you lead, it makes you a much better leader. And in the military,
oh, that's a great point.
You don't have a choice. You don't get to pick your employees, and you get a new set of employees every 2 or 3 years, right?
Wow, that's a good point.
And so if you're looking for leaders that can lead anybody, no better place to look.
That's a great point. I like that. Leading people that you don't get a choice to pick. That really says something, that you can lead. It really does say something there. So I'm glad you mentioned that and said that. So we've got a couple things in the chat. We have one person says, "Hey, thank you for your service and dedication." Another young lady, I believe, says, "Hey, thank you for your service." So let me ask you that question as well. No, I said I got one more question, last question, but this is one more question here. So when you hear that, does that resonate with you when people say, "Hey, thank you for your service," or not?
Yeah, I mean, the reality is, I appreciate any gratitude that anybody gives to any veteran. But I think a lot of us, we don't really make that big of a deal of it. Like we did our part, right? And it's something that we volunteered to do. We got something out of it, right? And so we don't all see ourselves as heroes or superheroes. We just see ourselves as we did our part for our country, so that our families, our people, our country could be better and stronger. And I think a lot has changed around that, where there's a lot of things put on top of veterans and patriotism and things like that. But I don't think any of us, we don't lead with that, right? Like we appreciate the service that we gave. We remember the folks that didn't make it home, with us. And we remember the folks that came home with us but didn't come home whole in one way or another. And so, yeah, we definitely appreciate anybody that appreciates us for our service, because it was an enormous sacrifice. But I think there are also many people in this country who are not in the military who are also sacrificing for our country, and their service is just as valuable, including people in healthcare, people that work as first responders and teachers, because they are definitely on the front lines of everything. Whether you're going to be a doctor or whether you're going to be in the military, teachers are going to get you there.
Absolutely. I was watching a show this last week, and that's one of the questions that came up, and people had different response to it. That was in the military. So I appreciate you just kind of explaining that. So that's really all we have from a conversation standpoint. I do want to remind people to register for our Veterans Brazen event. It's online. It's a virtual event, and it's going to be Thursday at 10 o'clock. We're getting a great response, but we want to see others kind of participate in that virtual event. We got a couple here. How can we be a great leader in the hospital organization sector? What I have to ensure while leading a team. Says how to be a great leader in the hospital organization sector. So that's one question. And what have to ensure while leading teams? I think what he's looking for, what he needs to ensure to be able to be a good leader.
Well, I mean, for starters, you have to take care of your team. You take care of your team will take care of you. And what that means is, you have to be able to create spaces where your folks can show up as their authentic self every day and produce, and create a safe space for them to do that, be able to challenge the system when it's appropriate, and give them places to develop and grow into. I mean, and that's for starters. There's a lot of, tricks of the trade that you can do, but if you don't do those things, I mean, you're not gonna be effective as a leader, because you can't do everything yourself. Your people have to be taken care of.
Absolutely. Good point. All right, good. I hope that answers your question. And thank you all for just sending in your chats. If you have any other questions, feel free to add them We're going to maybe give about another few seconds here before we kind of end it. But again, I just want to give another disclaimer to register for our Veterans Brazen event this Thursday at 10 Pacific Standard Time. We're doing a career event. We'd love to talk to veterans and see if we can kind of find a place for your home for you here at Stanford Health Care. We are on a journey. We're excited about, moving forward and how we're looking to move the needle. There's a lot of things that we're looking to do in the next year, and particularly with our veteran and our partnership with organizations outside of Stanford. So looking forward to that. So having said that, any last remarks, Shareef?
No, I just, to any veterans that are out there that are transitioning or are thinking about healthcare, it is healthcare in the military and healthcare in the private sector. There's not too much, difference. And so don't be afraid. Don't be shy. And, there's always, folks always think that, the best place to apply, is only the VA or only in, military hospitals and things like that. Expand your scope, apply for private sector and nonprofit hospitals and facilities and things like that. They are looking for veterans. They are looking for leaders, and you have what they are looking for.
Absolutely. So on that note, I want to say to all, I'm on LinkedIn. Shareef is on LinkedIn. If you have any questions, hey, connect with us on LinkedIn. We'd love to have a chat with you. If you can't participate in this Thursday's event, feel free to reach out to me and Shareef, and we'll see if we can kind of find a home for you here at Stanford Health Care. So with that said, have a phenomenal day. Have a blessed Thanksgiving. We'll see you again. Take care.